Hello, I'm Anna Burns-Francis. You're watching Al Jazeera live from Doha. Our top stories. Israeli strikes on southern Lebanon kill at least 19 people. Among the locations hit, a building housing the displaced. Calm in the Strait of Hormuz while Iran weighs up its response to the latest US proposal to end the war. Spain's Canary Islands prepare for the arrival of a cruise ship hit by the respiratory hantavirus outbreak. And troops, but no heavy weapons. Russia marks Victory Day with a scaled-back military parade. Israel has carried out a wave of attacks on southern Lebanon, killing at least 19 people. It comes just a day after 10 others were killed in Israeli strikes. They're the latest in weeks of attacks, despite a US-brokered ceasefire agreed last month. Israeli jets targeted more than 10 towns on Saturday. Hezbollah responded by firing a drone into northern Israel. Earlier, the Israeli military issued forced displacement orders for several areas in the districts of Tyre and Sidon. The latest escalations raising the stakes ahead of a third round of talks between Israel and Lebanon in Washington next week. Obaida Hito now joins us live from Tyre in southern Lebanon. Obaida, a series of strikes over the past couple of days with devastating impact. What's the latest?
Well, Anna, those strikes continue. We're in the city of Tyre right now, and we're hearing the sounds of explosions around us. A few minutes ago, there was a very large explosion with a huge sound, actually quite a distance away, but was very loud where we are here in Tyre. Reports are coming in that it was on the town of Bidyas near Al Abbasiyah. There's also, as we speak, a fighter jet flying over the city of Tyre. There's also been a drone, multiple drones possibly flying around over the city of Tyre for most of the day today. And you mentioned these multiple strikes across southern Lebanon causing a large number of casualties. For example, the one you mentioned in Seksekia, a building housing displaced people. It's not clear the final casualty count from that strike, but as the Lebanese civil defense continue to respond to try and recover people from the rubble, it seems like the death toll from that strike is going to continue going up. And we've seen also Israel carry out multiple strikes on moving vehicles today. One of them a motorcycle in the Nabatia district killing a father and his daughter, and then two other vehicles on the main highway in the area of Sadiyat leading from the north to the south of the country, where at least 3 people were killed in those incidents. And those strikes continue as we speak here in southern Lebanon.
Those strikes continue, as you say, Obaida, but there are just days now until the next round of talks between Israel and Lebanon. What, then, is Lebanon's government going to be able to achieve?
The Lebanese government officials who have spoken about these talks have been clear. Both the president and the prime minister are saying that the priority is to shore up this ceasefire, this ongoing ceasefire here in southern Lebanon and across the country. We haven't seen much of a ceasefire, but they're saying that they want to have a stop to the violence before they go to the negotiating table to talk in good faith about how they can move forward. These are initial talks to set up some kind of foundation that can be worked on to achieve things into the future. The Lebanese government is saying that their priorities are making sure that there's a clear timeline for withdrawal of Israeli troops from Lebanese territory, as well as the return of detainees that are being held by Israel, and some issues related to reconstruction, especially in the places where Israeli troops are currently present in southern Lebanon. At least 55 towns and villages where a policy of systematic demolition is being implemented, destroying homes and infrastructure. And then at the end of the list, and perhaps the most important issue, is support from the international community, possibly about the issue of demilitarizing the South and making sure that all of the weapons and the decision of going to war and declaring peace stays with the government in Beirut. And that's possibly going going to be the most challenging thing for the Lebanese government to achieve in these talks, and probably too early right now to discuss them while bombs continue to fall here in southern Lebanon.
Obaida Hito joining us from Tyre in Lebanon. Thank you. The European Union sounding the alarm about the humanitarian situation in Lebanon. On a visit to Beirut, the bloc's crisis management chief said more than half the population now relies on aid. The EU's allocated more than $110 million in emergency funding to Lebanon since early March. That's when large-scale hostilities resumed between Israel and Hezbollah.
Even north of the Litani River, where some of these constraints have eased, it is still not enough. We need humanitarian access. In full respect of international humanitarian law, aid cannot save lives if it cannot reach people. Hospitals and ambulances targeted and journalists attacked for simply doing their job. There is no justification for this. International humanitarian law must be respected.
The Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam's in Damascus, where he's held talks with Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa. Al Jazeera's Heidi Pett has this report from Daraa in southern Syria.
It's been a bit over a year since Nawaf Salam last met with Ahmed al-Sharaa, and a lot has changed since then. So this visit is about re-establishing relations and discussing cooperation on a few key issues, particularly in the context of the wider regional war, Israel's campaign in Lebanon and its continued occupation and operations in southern Syria. So on the table, number one, border and security issues. There has long been a problem with the smuggling of drugs and arms between Lebanon and Syria, notably, of course, because Syria used to be part of the land route between Iran and its ally Hezbollah. Now, that decreased massively after the fall of the Assad regime, but in the last couple of months, the Syrian authorities have announced a number of operations and arrests, the dismantling of tunnels, which they said were used for attempted smuggling of weapons over into Lebanon. Now, significantly, in the last week, they've also announced the arrest of several members of what they described as Hezbollah cells attempting attacks on the Syrian government. And last month, there were also arrests of Hezbollah cells that were said to be attempting to fire rockets into northern Israel. The government of Syria and Lebanon find themselves aligned at this moment on trying to rein in Hezbollah. Also on the table is cooperation on the issues of trade, the economy, the return of Syrian prisoners, more than 2,000 of whom remain detained inside Lebanon, many of them accused of terrorism offences, and of course the issue of Syrian refugees in Lebanon. Despite a spike in returns due to the war there are still more than 1 million Syrians displaced in Lebanon. Heidi Pett, Al Jazeera, Daraa, southern Syria.
All right, now to the war on Iran, where a ceasefire with the US appears to be holding, despite sporadic skirmishes in the Strait of Hormuz. US President Donald Trump says he's waiting for Tehran's response to Washington's latest proposal to end the conflict and resume negotiations. Previous attempts, including last month's talks in Pakistan, have failed to reach a deal. Trump paused a US maritime operation to escort ships out of the Gulf earlier this week in anticipation of an agreement. Iranian officials say they'll reply in their own time. Our reporter Al-Migdad Al-Ruhaid's been following the latest developments from the Iranian capital, Tehran.
What we do have that Ismail Baqai confirming that they are right now reviewing the response from the United States officials. Right now are working on that response, and also he emphasized the idea of the focus on the ending the war, the focus on that 14-point plan conveyed to the United States over the past days. He said that we are right now concerning about how to end this war, how to mediate between that gaps between the United States and Iranian, but at the same time he didn't mention any exact time for delivering that message. The indication is clear that right now the response is reviewing under definitely under the stakeholders here in the capital, whether it's IRGC, whether it's a top diplomat, whether the parliament members, and also from the negotiating team, and at the same time at the end is by supreme leaders. So that could happen at any time, but as Ismail Baqai said, at appropriate time for Iranians.
All right, joining us on set now to discuss is General Mark Kimmett, a former US Assistant Secretary of State for Political and Military Affairs, and Naga Mortazavi, a Senior Fellow with the Centre for International Policy. Thank you both. General, I'll start with you. A lot of speculation about this 48-hour deadline. Do timelines matter anymore in this conflict?
No, they really don't. I mean, we've seen so many timelines established, timelines broken. I think what we just need to wait for is to see any kind of response. Obviously, if it's 7 days, 14 days, that's a different story. But I think we're still in the margin of error right now.
OK. Naga, do you agree? Surely if Iran was happy with the piece of paper in front of them, they would have come back and said, looks good.
Immediately, yes. But also it's important they haven't said yet no. But I think what's overshadowing all of this is essentially the conflict, the resumption of the conflict slowly in the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, the U.S., from Iranian's viewpoint, has violated the ceasefire, unilaterally trying to open the strait by force, calling it freedom or humanitarian. And that has led to, I think, a resumption, albeit small, of the conflict. And I think now the thinking in Tehran is more leaning towards the fact that this may be a step towards more escalation, and it will definitely narrow the path to diplomacy, which I think the only way out of this war is going to be an agreement, a diplomatic resolution. It won't be on the battlefield, but I think what happened starting Monday has really overshadowed the process and narrowed the path to that agreement.
General, I saw you shaking your head. Do you disagree that that's Iran's perspective, or do you disagree that that's an accurate reflection of the situation?
Well, I disagree that the U.S. Doing a FONOPS, a freedom of navigation operation through the Strait of Hormuz and international waters would be considered illegal. Now, it certainly may be considered provocative given the current circumstances, but we've gone round and round about whether the Iranians have the right to impose restrictions on international waters, or that ludicrous new map where they start claiming both Omani and UAE territorial waters. I think by having the Bahrain resolution in front of the United Nations, with the ambassadors from UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Kuwait, and the United States supporting that Bahraini document going in front of the United Nations, condemning the Iran for violating international waters. I think it's a clear signal that nobody in the world, no institution, no country, no organization will support the outlandish claims of Iran to international waters.
OK. It's certainly not, whether it's international or not, is not a debate we're going to settle today.
Just to add quickly, I mean, this is a very special waterway. It's actually Iranian and Omani territorial waters. It's unlike any other. So the legality is still, it's a complex issue. Iran is a country that's being attacked. This is right off their coast. This is not off the coast of the U.S. or Mexico.
Sure, but there is a transit passage, right, that is enshrined in law.
But in wartime, you know, there's a lot of legal pushback from the other side. But I think what matters here is that the U.S. added its own blockade. I mean, this goes even before this Monday, and there was a ceasefire. And when the Iranians announced that they're going to fully open the Strait of Hormuz, President Trump said, thank you, but I'm keeping the blockade. So this has reduced trust for the diplomatic process, for any form of deal-making or agreement with the administration. And that trust was already pretty low because Iranians basically are saying their experiences, they have negotiated with this administration during peacetime twice. And both times they were attacked in the middle of negotiations. And now that it's wartime, that's why they're trying to look east to more powers like Russia and China to see if they can add weight to this process and some form of agreement.
I want to talk about that in a moment. Just briefly on trust, though. Given the situation in the Strait means that virtually all commercial traffic has completely stalled. There are no insurance for going through. Shipping companies do not want their vessels going through. In terms of the Gulf countries and their perspective at this point, General, will they even want the US to leave the region?
No, in fact, I think the support shown at the press conference with all of the major countries in the Gulf, with the exception of Oman for obvious reasons, demonstrates the fact that they were standing with the United States, says they're not ready to do this on their own. I think a very important point was just made. Clearly, the Strait of Hormuz in wartime is open water. in wars, you fight wars on open water, international waters. That's not unusual. So if Iran is saying we are going to fight and we are going to close the strait and shoot at American ships because we're at war with them, I'm okay with that. What I'm objecting to is the notion that after the war, we have now set up a new toll booth in land that is tighter, that is larger than a strait that is wider than the Straits of Malacca and the Straits of Gibraltar. It sets a precedent for the world, and I'm glad to see that there's not a country or an organization in the world that stands behind this outlandish claim and actions of Iran.
I don't think anybody wants to pay more money for accessing
It's
this
not-
waterway.
yeah, I mean,
And
that's
how
not
will
the
Gulf
discussion.
countries feel about it? They are Iran's neighbour, and presumably, given that many of them host US bases, at this point, given Iran's rhetoric around that alone would indicate that they too would be subject to this protocol.
Yeah, and I don't think they're happy about it. I mean, Iran and these GCC countries who host U.S. bases, who Iran sees as somewhat directly or indirectly involved in the war, also depends on which country you talk about, Oman
For
or the
sure.
UAE, they're very different. That the relationship between each of these countries is going to look different, or potentially there will be a shift in that dynamic also between these countries and the U.S. I mean, remember, these countries are stuck between a powerful ally halfway across the world and a powerful neighbor just across the Gulf. And so I don't think they can, ignore any of these two. And Iran has been their neighbor for thousands of years and will remain their neighbor. But as far as the toll booth, the discussion I'm hearing from inside Iran is not a toll booth. It's more post-war, trying to figure out some form of a legal mechanism that is accepted internationally, that is going to be not looking like any other waterway because the situation is different. But I just think what is happening during wartime and in the country and from that country in the name of security and safety, et cetera, is going to, and now that the military commanders are in the driver's seat, is going to be very different when the country returns back to peacetime and you'll have, the diplomats, the politicians running the show. But at the end of the day, what I'm hearing from Tehran as far as the rhetoric is shifting a little bit to try to make it regional, to try to bring in the neighbors and not just Oman, who shares the waterway, but potentially others. And they understand that post-war, they also, the Iranians, would have to try to figure out a way to live with their neighbors across the
All right, I'm afraid that's all we have time for in this discussion. Thank you both, Naga Mortazavi and General Mark Kimmett, joining us.
Thank you.
Israeli forces have destroyed several residential buildings in Gaza City after issuing forced evacuation orders for residents in the area. Hospital officials say at least 4 people, including a child, were injured in the strikes. Witnesses say multiple homes were destroyed or heavily damaged in the Al-Shati refugee camp. Israel says the strikes targeted what it described as armed group infrastructure in the area, despite the ceasefire that came into effect in October.
We were suddenly told to evacuate. They bombed an entire block and my house, which I spent 30 years building. It was destroyed.
This was the only usable room. Here I kept my clothes and belongings. Today I'm homeless. There's nowhere for me to go. Even the room that sheltered me is destroyed. As you can see, all my children were sleeping right here. If there hadn't been warning or any sign that there was going to be a bombing, my children, my husband and I would all be dead right here.
Tarek Abu Azoum has more from Gaza City.
This used to be a bustling neighborhood in a Al-Shati refugee camp west of Gaza City. Now this site has turned into a pile of ashes, debris and destroyed houses that have been heavily impacted from a series of airstrikes that were conducted overnight by the Israeli military. Residents at this site told us that they have received a phone call from an Israeli intelligence officer ordering people to leave the area before attacking this neighborhood. This rarely happens, in fact, and people have been given a very short window of time to evacuate this site. As you can see, this area has inflicted severe damage as families are trying to clean the debris from inside their damaged buildings, and people did not think that this site could be one day targeted given its far location from the yellow demarcation line and its current classification to be a green safe zone. But the situation is simply apocalyptic. People are trying to extract the remnants of their clothing, their furniture, and